Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, back from vacation. So pleased to welcome as our brand new sponsor, American for Prosperity's Akash Chougule. Akash, good. I guess it's July still. I was going to say good August to you, but we still have a couple of days left. How goes the summer in the Beltway? Mostly Congress has been gone, so we've been safe, but I'm not down there sweltering. How's it going for you?
Yeah, it's hot and full of a lot of political messaging, but you know how that goes in a presidential year, Hugh. It's good to be back with you.
Well, Akash, we're going to make a regular date of this, at least weekly, for the first few days to set the stage for the election. We want people to understand the stakes. Now, I don't know if you have to be nonpartisan or if you can take a partisan political position, but you can certainly talk about the differences in approaches between Team Trump and Team Harris when it comes to the fiscal cliff we are approaching.
Yeah, well, I think to be honest, Team Trump still has some questions to answer. Obviously, if we look back at his track record from the first term, he was very strong on taxes. That tax reform was the most pro-growth tax package we had seen in decades. They made a permanent, huge cut to the corporate tax rate. It reduced the number of individual tax brackets. It raised the standard deduction. It cut individual rates. There were a number of other reforms. Now, you and I will get into what's expiring, what's permanent, what can be done there. But we've heard some overtures from some Republicans that say, oh, we want to raise the corporate tax rate. We want to raise taxes on the wealthy. President Trump is not messing around with that at all. He wants another corporate tax cut. He wants to build in a pro-growth manner on those tax reforms. On spending, you and I have discussed his record, frankly, was not strong, but he's at least talked about controlling spending and making it a priority next term. With Kamala Harris, we know exactly what we're getting, right? She has promised literally trillions with a T, trillions of dollars in additional spending, wants to roll back the tax cuts, raise taxes on the vast majority of American households and American businesses. And so on taxes, the record is clear. On spending, frankly, I think both parties have room for improvement.
Akash Chougule, tell us a little bit about the California economic mess, because I think one of the things people have to understand as they consider Trump versus Harris is that Kamala Harris is right out of the San Francisco Democratic Power Center, and it has run the Golden State into the ground. I lived there for 30 years, and I was there in the golden years of Pete Wilson, and before that, George Deukmejian. It is a nightmare now, and Kamala Harris, what have they done to California that you are afraid they will do to the United States?
Yeah, this is a great question. And the reason it's great, Hugh, is because it's actually bigger and worse than most Americans realize. Most Americans turn on the news and they see California cities riddled with poverty and they see high taxes. It's worse in two ways. One is how it's affecting the state, right? So you've got a couple of very wealthy enclaves like the San Francisco Bay Area and LA, and you've got essentially a very small number of huge companies that drive all of the economic output of California, right? These tech companies, and you've got major media and Hollywood, things like that in LA. They account for a huge portion of the growth. If you get just a couple miles off the coast, or a few dozen miles off the coast, if you basically split California east west, the eastern half of California is struggling mightily. Enormous levels of poverty, drug addiction, out migration, and the reason for that is my second point here, which is it's much more than taxes. If you look at spending, you look at energy policy, you look at labor policy, you look at other regulations. California makes it prohibitively difficult for a normal middle class person to live, work, raise a family, or even think about starting a business. And it really cuts across all of these issue areas. And we've seen the Democrats do this before, where they take bad ideas from California and try to make them national. Kamala Harris would put
Well,
that right
I think we will be talking repeatedly about what the regulatory environment in California has become. It's a nightmare, and we're going to talk about their tax structure, et cetera. But let's talk first about the Trump tax cuts, which are due to expire, I believe, at the end of 2025. So people will have the benefit of whatever their marginal rate is until 2025, but they go away unless they're extended, Akash. How important is it to extend and indeed deepen the Trump tax cuts?
This is, I would argue, one of, or perhaps the most important thing facing Congress and the next president in 2025. As I mentioned before, the corporate tax cut down from 35% to 21%, that was permanent, Hugh. And the reason Congress made that permanent is that it's important for businesses to be able to plan ahead more than 10 years, right? 8, 10, 15, 20 years to make big investments. So it was important to do that. The individual side tax cuts, those were temporary. And as you mentioned, should Congress choose to do nothing, everybody's individual tax rates, or the vast majority of Americans will face an individual income tax increase. That expansion of the child tax credit, that would disappear. The doubling of the standard deduction, which not only cut taxes for a lot of Americans, but made filing taxes simpler, that would disappear. And so that is an enormous, enormous responsibility facing Congress next year. I think the vast majority of Republicans are aligned not just on extending those or even making them permanent, Hugh, but we need to be thinking bigger and saying we need to build on those tax cuts. Can we cut rates? Can we simplify the code? Can we get rid of some of this cronyism, corporate welfare, the tax carve-outs and the handouts? Can we build on what was done in 2017 instead of moving backwards with tax hikes and more complexity and tariffs and all these other things that other people want to push that are going to make life more expensive for Americans at a time when President Biden has already done that over the last 4 years?
We'll make sure that I talk with Akash about energy production going forward. He's going to be with me as a regular guest as AFP is signed on between now and the election as one of our prime sponsors. But Akash, before I forget, you've been running the Secure Border, SecureAmerica.com website. Is that the one you're going to plant the flag on between now and the election? Secure Border, SecureAmerica.com, or is there a new one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a number of important issues between now and November, Hugh, and you talk about them every day. But that issue is, again, number one or number two in the minds of the American people is the need to secure the border. We need a pro-growth immigration system that welcomes people who want to contribute to our country. People rightfully have no faith in Congress to even have that conversation productively when the border looks like the way it does today. And so the number one responsibility as far as our domestic national security is the need to secure the border. We've actually brought activists down to the border. America's Prosperity Foundation has done several trips to the border. We'd love to have you join us on one of these, Hugh, just to show people exactly what it looks like, what the Border Patrol are dealing with. And so we really encourage people to visit that website to learn more about solutions, the problem as well, but solutions as far as how we fix the border and what it takes, because there is no simple fix to it, but it's absolutely vital.
Last question for today, Akash, and he's going to come back with me today, tomorrow, and Wednesday to set the scene. Small businesses got a massive tax cut under Donald Trump. That will go away. It's not permanent, I do not believe. The LLP, the LC, the subchapter S, the subchapter C, small businesses got a 20%, I think it was a 20% tax cut. What happens to that if Kamala Harris wins?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're largely referring to what's called a pass-through deduction. A lot of small businesses file on the individual side, and so they're passed through. And the TCJA created a extended deduction, which cut taxes, as you mentioned, for a lot of small businesses. Kamala Harris has made clear she wants to get rid of the 2017 tax law. And so they couch it as though it's going to raise taxes on billionaires and large corporations. But look, Hugh, the vast majority of small businesses received a tax cut from the 2017 tax bill. Small business confidence hit an all-time high after that bill was enacted. More than 80% of American households, that means the vast majority of middle class and lower income households, got a tax cut from that bill. Kamala Harris's promise to repeal that legislation would be a massive tax hike and job killer on the American people when we can least afford it.
We're going to continue talking about the fiscal cliff with Akash Chougule throughout the week, but right now, go to SecureBorder, and get involved with AFP's fight to keep America strong, both through reasonable, rational immigration laws, enforcement of the laws that we have on the books, and continuation of the Trump tax cuts, and indeed deepening of those. Thank you, Akash. We'll talk again, I think, tomorrow. I want to let everyone know that Maduro